Thank you. Now we are ready to start, Cecilia.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our day 2 of the HIV is Not a Crime Academy 4. Today's plenary, we have like speakers who are going to share with us, some of the stories that we hear about how transgender communities are impacted by criminalizations in general. I say criminalization in general because we currently don't have any ways to track data of transgender people being arrested. It's not on the record, unfortunately, and that's something that we definitely need to advocate for change. So I think that the interpreters have something to say before we begin.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to HINAC Day 2. Buenas tardes todos. Bienvenidos al segundo día de HINAC. This call has simultaneous English and Spanish interpretation. In order to access the interpretation, follow the instructions that you see on your screen. You can click the globe if you're joining from a computer, unless it's a Chromebook, and then select the language in which you would like to participate. Or if you're joining from a cell phone or tablet, look for 3 little dots, click More, click Language Interpretation, and then click the language you would like to participate in. And don't forget to hit Done. Si se está uniendo a través de una computadora, menos que sea un Chromebook, puede seleccionar el globo terráqueo que ve al fondo de su pantalla y luego seleccionar el idioma en cual le gustaría participar. Si se está uniendo a través de un celular o una tableta, va a ser el mismo proceso, menos que va a buscar 3 puntitos que van a estar en una esquina de su celular o su tableta, y luego van a seleccionar donde dice interpretación de idiomas, seleccionar el idioma en cual les gustaría participar, y recuérdense de seleccionar finalizado. A few language justice guidelines, just a reminder to please speak slowly for our interpreters and to speak one person at a time. Unas pautas sobre la justicia del lenguaje. Por favor, hablen lentamente y una persona a la vez. And just to interpret what Cecilia mentioned at the beginning, esta sesión se va a enfocar en la criminalización de la comunidad trans, así que vamos a tener oradores que van a estar compartiendo sobre la criminalización de la comunidad trans, porque parte de lo que vamos a estar hablando durante esta sesión se va a enfocar en cómo no hay claras maneras de evaluar y averiguar cómo ha sido afectada la comunidad trans por criminalización. With that, enjoy your session. Thank you so much. Y con eso, disfruten de su sesión.
And thank you, interpreter. So I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Cecilia Chung, and I am the founder of Positively Trans, a member of the Executive Committee planning HIV is Not a Crime Academy 4. And my day job is with Transgender Law Center, where the project Positively Trans resides, and we've been around for about 5 years now, and I'm sure that many of you might have seen us in conferences or have attended our workshops or have attended workshops that we have spoken in. And by the way, Tiomi is a Positively Trans members, and when in the closing plenary, the host Tori Cooper is also a proud member of Positively Trans. So we have 3 speakers today. I know that in the program it might have said 4. One of the speakers is not able to join us because of some health issues, and so we will have the 3 dynamic speakers. So the first speakers is Lynly. Lynly Egyes is the legal director of Transgender Law Center. Prior to joining TLC, Lynly was the legal director at the Sex Worker Projects at the Urban Justice Center. During the 8 years at SWP, Lynly provided legal service to sex workers and survivors of trafficking. Lynly launched SWP's LGBT anti-trafficking program and created SWP's Rapid Criminal Court Responses program. In 2014, Lynly began volunteering in family detention centers representing sex workers, traffic victims, and LGBTQ community members. She authored chapters in broadening the scope of human trafficking and social work practice, and co-authored the report Immigration on Ice, a report on immigration's home raid operations. So Lynly, take it away.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. And thank you for the introduction. It is always a little odd hearing your bio read out loud. But so today I want to talk to you about sex work and the conflation of sex work and human trafficking. Criminalization of sex work is an issue that disproportionately impacts trans communities. It is an issue I've worked on for a number of years. I also just want to recognize that there's a lot of expertise in this room, in this Zoom room, as well as on this panel around sex work as well. So I am not the person who knows everything. And I really strongly encourage other people to speak up if there's something I missed or something that could have been said in a better way. So with that, let's talk about sex work. So I get a lot of questions. I talked a lot about sex work in my life. And I often get a question of, well, what is sex work? Because people often think of only specific types of sex work when they think about sex work, but really sex work is any type of labor where the explicit goal is to produce a sexual or erotic response from a client. And there is some type of exchange of money, food, shelter, or anything else of value. And it can be anything from porn to lap dances to stripping to cam work to fetish work to BDSM to street-based prostitution to escorts. There's a lot of different types of sex work out there. And it can be formal, it can be informal, it can be someone working by themselves, it could be a collective of people working together, or it could be a third party as well, where someone's working specifically for a third party. Some sex work is criminalized, some sex work is not criminalized. Some people are doing sex work because it's what they want to do. Some people are doing sex work because it's the only job they can get based on the circumstances they're in. And some people are coerced or forced into sex work. Sex work is just another form of labor. So we have to look at it as another form of labor. So in the same sense that someone might choose to do farm work because that's the work they want to do, or based on the circumstances they're in, that's the only job they can get, or people are also forced or coerced into farm work. So it's really important that we look at sex work in the same way we look at any other form of labor. And people have a variety of different experiences in sex work. So it's not that one person's experience represents everyone's experience. It's important to also remember that laws around sex work are different in every state in the United States, as well as in Puerto Rico. So how we define sex work, or how we define what's criminalized and what's not criminalized, is very specific per state. And a good example of that is I can tell you exactly what legally the definition of prostitution is in New York and what is criminalized, and it's very connected to a specific type of sexual act. But if I go over the bridge to New Jersey, things around BDSM or even things that have actually no sexual contact are also considered prostitution. So it's important to understand what the definition is in your state if it's something you're interested in learning about. So how is sex work criminalized? Sex work is criminalized in a lot of ways, depending on the state that we're in. So it could be, someone could be criminalized for selling sex. Someone could be criminalized for buying sex. Someone could be criminalized for loitering and might have nothing to do with sex work and might just be hanging out. And we've seen a lot of that type of those types of laws throughout the country, specifically loitering for the purposes of prostitution. Also in a lot of places, they're called walking while trans laws. New York just repealed our law, which is very exciting, amazing work to the advocates who made that happen. So we definitely see people are specifically targeted around sex work. So it's important to also know that it isn't just specifically people who are buying or selling sex who can be criminalized. So people could be criminalized for promoting prostitution. Once again, different in every state, but in a place like New York, say two sex workers are working together to keep themselves safe. One person writes down the license plate of the number of a person that someone else is getting into the car with, just to keep track, which many people do as a safety precaution. There's a possibility that that person could be arrested for promoting prostitution, when the reality is all that person is doing is trying to keep their friend or coworker safe. People can be arrested for deriving support from any of the proceeds from prostitution. So that means working in some way, getting the money and living off of money of someone who's working, which is confusing because if sex work is just labor, why are we criminalizing people who are living their lives from that money? But people do criminalize that. There's also a lot of criminalization of third parties. So some sex workers choose to have drivers, some sex workers choose to have security, and that's another thing that could be considered maybe compelling prostitution, promoting prostitution. So it's important to understand all of this type of criminalization because it's all bad. Like overall, it's just bad. And there are different ways to look at criminalization and different things that can be done to make it safer for sex workers. So what we have in the United States is criminalization. When there are laws, people break those laws, and end up going to jail. In other places, there's legalization. And what that means is the government has specific regulations to the sex trade, which governs the ability to sell sex. So this could mean that some people are able to engage in sex work under the regulations that exist, but possibly someone who might be undocumented from a different country, that person could be outside of that, the rules of that country or state. And then there's a decriminalization model. And basically what decriminalization is taking all of the laws off of the books against sex work. It makes the transaction to buy and sell sex work legal. It also makes the ability to facilitate work, support other sex workers. Now, I get asked all the time about how can I support sex work with all the human trafficking out there, which is fine. I get asked that pretty regularly, and I've learned how to deal with that kind of ridiculous question. But it's important to remember when people conflate sex work and human trafficking, it's really harmful to both sex workers and survivors of trafficking. Number one, the majority of human trafficking in the United States does not happen into the sex trade. I'm going to say it again. The majority of trafficking in the United States does not happen into the sex trade. And we know that because there is actually a certification process for survivors of trafficking, and we know the numbers. And I think it's like 70 or 80% of those identified are trafficked into another form of labor. And take a moment to think about that. Considering all of the money and resources that go into focusing on human trafficking into the sex trade, and all of the police and all of the organizations, and still the majority of people are trafficked into another form of labor. So it's really important when we talk about sex work and we talk about human trafficking that we understand that it is, once again, another form of labor, and the conflation of the two is really harmful because it invisibilizes all of the rest of the human trafficking out there. Also, when we conflate the two, it's actually quite harmful to sex workers themselves. Not everyone is doing sex work is a victim in some way. In fact, the majority of people are not victims. This is something that they're either choosing to do or it's based on the circumstances they're in. And everyone has a different idea of what's okay to happen to their body And we really shouldn't be putting that on other people of what we think. I also want to talk about how horrific and what the implications are when we criminalize sex work and what it means for survivors of trafficking. I've worked with survivors of trafficking for well over a decade now. The majority of my clients are LGBT, and trafficking survivors get out of trafficking situations in 3 ways. The first way is, from my experience and all the work I've done, number 1, another sex worker helps them. Someone who's doing sex work because it's their choice or the circumstance they're in helps them leave, identifies the situation because they can read what's going on and says, please use my phone. How do I support you? Do you need a little bit of money? Maybe a place to stay. This has happened time and time again. Number 2, clients. I know many people who have left trafficking situations because their clients helped them leave. The third is sometimes law enforcement involvement is a way people leave. I've actually seen that go really badly because usually those raids are really quite terrifying. So I don't really think that is an effective way of people leaving. And the majority of time, people actually end up back in the trafficking situation. So, but let's talk about that. If the 2 ways that people are leaving trafficking situations are through clients of sex workers and other sex workers, does it make sense to criminalize them? If all people care about is ending trafficking into commercial sex, it does not make sense to criminalize the people who actually have the most access to the victims of human trafficking, because if we actually continue to criminalize them, they will be unable to help people leave. And we know this over and over again. We know this is how people leave trafficking situations. So it just doesn't make sense to criminalize people if all you care about is human trafficking. The second thing I just want to raise, and I've been talking for a bit, and so I'm almost done, is I just want to also talk about what criminalization does to people who aren't in trafficking situations. And I call this process, how do you create the best victim? And this is how you create the best victim. You arrest someone for prostitution charges. You put their face on a billboard or on your website, the police website. All of this happens regularly. You then they end up with a conviction on their record. In some states, that conviction actually could lead to being placed on the sex offender registry. You make it almost impossible for them to find housing somewhere. You make it almost impossible for them to find another job, access to higher education. Wow, what a perfect place for a person who wants to coerce someone or control someone to go. It's on a website. You can actually see the person's face. So a trafficker literally could pick out that person, and it's done for you by the police. So it doesn't make sense, if you care about ending human trafficking into commercial sex, to criminalize sex work. Last thing I'll say, there is a conversation about end-demand models, also known as the Nordic model and the Swedish model. And this criminalizes clients and not sex workers themselves. Some people say, this is great, but we know from studies and from talking to sex workers themselves, this is not an effective tool to keep sex workers safe, to keep survivors safe. Because why would we criminalize clients if clients are actually helping people leave trafficking situations? And I frame it in this way of talking a lot about survivors of trafficking, because this is honestly what many people can latch onto a little bit when we're talking about sex work. So I'm gonna stop there because I've talked quite a bit, and I can talk about sex work, talking about sex work, not human trafficking, for quite some time, but I definitely want to leave space for some other people. So thank you.
So thank you, Lynly. And before we go on to the second speaker, there's a quick question for you that I'm pretty sure you can answer in less than 30 seconds. What is the federal government doing to assist sex work and sex workers and decriminalizations of these laws? We're talking about the federal government.
That's funny. I don't know anything that they're doing. There is a conversation of doing some research into some horrific law that came out called SESTA FOSTA, which makes it illegal for people to advertise online, for sex workers to advertise online. So they might be doing some study about that, and but other than that, I'm not really sure what the federal government is doing to help sex workers. If this is something else someone else knows, I would hope someone would step in. But the federal government hasn't really been rocking with sex workers much. But there are states that are looking at decriminalization. There are prosecutors who are saying, we do not want to prosecute these crimes anymore. So even if you arrest people, we will not prosecute. So we are seeing movement. The activism and organizers who've been working on this for decades are just doing outstanding work and are making changes by leaps and bounds.
And I'll save the rest of the questions to the end for the interest of time. And the next speaker is my sisters, my wonderful sisters, Janetta Louise Johnson. Janetta is the Executive Director at Transgender, Gender Variant, and Intersex Justice Project. She is a formerly incarcerated Black transgender woman and has been an activist and advocate in the transgender communities since 1997, when she moved to San Francisco from her hometown of Tampa, Florida. She survived 3.5 years in federal prison, and while inside, she fiercely and tirelessly advocated for her rights as an incarcerated transgender person. She became politicized through her kinship with Miss Major, her adopted trans mother, and after her release from prison, returned to her work with nonprofits and social services agencies with a higher compassion for people on the inside of jails and prisons. In 2006, she put her skills as a community organizer, trainer, and activist to work as interim director of TGI Justice Project, during which she coordinated vibrant grassroots fundraisers to support the organizations. In 2014, she became the permanent executive director of TGIJP when Ms. Major retired from the positions. And I must say, Janetta's organization should be a model for every single state across the country. And and what Janetta did not mention in her bio is that this is the only organizations that is led by trans survivor for trans survivors of incarcerations. And with no further ado, Janetta.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Cecilia, for extending the invitation for me to be here. And it's great to see everybody. And also, I'm really, really an introvert and I don't like speaking, but I feel that I do it as a necessity because of the current climate that we're constantly being placed in very compromised situation. And I'm glad you mentioned Lynly, Sesta Foster, because it just reminds me of when the Sesta Foster law was passed. And it was, I don't know, it was sad for me because I think about street-based sex worker. I'm very cognizant and concerned and want to be as attentive as I possibly can to within our organizations to support sex workers. And I thought, and specifically as we are in COVID, and I think about the first 7 months when the city and county shut down the city and county and said, everybody stay home. And I thought about the sex workers that live in the area that I live in that don't have a home. And I also think about sex workers that are currently living in hotels and how are they going to sustain themselves and how they're going to pay their daily rent. And with very limited income, we just started the process of supporting the sex workers in the Polk Street area. And we're always trying to find safer places and safer situations to support people in reducing their risk. And we organized and got went up to that particular area, and eventually we ended up with having to find hotels for about for X amount of people. The majority of them were sex workers, their partners, and a lot of them were just best friends, and just really being intentional about keeping people safe, specifically in terms of times where there's a pandemic or epidemic or a law that criminalizes sex workers, we just try to create safer opportunities. And we also like hired some people part-time within our budget so that at least the rent could be paid. At least the rent can be paid, you know, because being a sex worker, we're survivalists. And I know for me, I've worked through Hurricane Elena when I lived in Florida, which I look back at that and I think that you know, it was just so sad that there was nobody there to reach out and support, you know, the trans people at that time doing sex work. But for us, I think about the violence and the sexual violence that trans people experience inside of jails and prison, which puts them at a higher risk for contracting HIV and AIDS and other STDs. And we just, sex work is work. It's a job. It's employment. I mean, I survived. I mean, right now I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization, but of course I did sex work for many, many years for my survival and sustainability, which allows me to be here and present now. And I've learned a tremendous amount of skills doing sex work. I mean, you become one of the best negotiators, like, become one of the best negotiators. And try to we mostly, most of the work that we do working with sex workers is just finding safer housing situations where people can feel safe and a little bit more comfortable in their current situations. And living in San Francisco, it is so difficult to find housing. So that's a huge issue. And we were fortunate enough to get people in housing that actually had evictions on their records. It's like, and that's what I say, in being a sex worker, you got to be very crafty and creative and just like, but so, and I've done sex work for many, many years. I know I already said that, but I'm gonna stop right now and then I'll come back, right? Or do you have a question?
Yes. So I think that we will save like questions toward the end. And at least I have questions for you all. Thank you, Janetta. Like I said, you know, Janetta's program is one of a kind. And if you think that, you know, your city or your state needs a program like Janetta's, talk to her. She's very easy to talk to, and I'm pretty sure that she would like share with you all her wisdom how to set up a TGIJP branch in your city or state.
And also, you know, providing better opportunities for trans people coming directly out of prison. Like, I remember I was like, oh God, I gotta go ask these people if they would hire trans. I gotta go ask these people, will they hire trans? I'm like, forget that. I'm not asking nobody nothing. I'm developing leadership development and training within our own organizations. I'm not going to explaining nothing to nobody about trans people. We're just gonna like create jobs and opportunity. And that's just, and that doesn't prevent people from doing sex work, but it's an opportunity for them to be a little bit safer and create a sustainability. So if they don't feel like going out, they don't have to, because the paycheck pays the rent. And we usually hire them, especially people that have spent long-term in prison. We make sure that we leave an opportunity set aside in the event that happens, but that's people in California prison. That's it for me.
Yeah, thank you, Janetta. And well, being a former sex worker myself, you know, like there's definitely a lot that I could relate to from the first two speakers. And our next speaker, she's going to like talk about some egregious practice, you know, especially for Louisiana. And Wendi Cooper is a transgender woman and executive director of Transcending Women, who is a native of New Orleans, Louisiana. She earned her Bachelor of Science in 2011 and her Master's of Arts in Criminal Justice. Yes, with a concentration in juvenile justice in 2015, both at Southern University at New Orleans. She is the founder of Can't Stand campaign, which seeks to liberate individuals who are affected by Louisiana's, this is the law that we're talking about, crime against nature statute enacted in 1805. She is the, sorry. They found that that law disproportionately target the LGBTQ community, especially trans women of color. In 2011, Ms. Cooper was also a community organizer with No Justice Project. So it's New Orleans Justice Project. She provided key testimony in federal lawsuit that successfully challenged Louisiana crime against nature by solicitation statutes and secured the removal of more than 700 women from the sex offender registries. Way to go, Wendi. Also in 2018, Wendi was appointed to Mayor Loyola Cantrell's transition team as a member of the Health and Wellness Subcommittee. That same year, the mayor's director of human rights and equity appointed her as the chair of the New Orleans LGBTQ+ task force. And Governor John Bell Edwards appointed her as a member of the Louisiana Task Force on Women's Incarcerations. Because of her connections with the community, Ms. Cooper received a proclamation by Council Member Loyola Cantrell, who is now the mayor of the city of New Orleans. She was featured in an MSNBC News documentary, Floodlines, Community and Resistance from Katrina to the Jena 6, as well as human rights campaigns feature stories on crime against nature by solicitation. Ms. Cooper continues to work diligently for the dignity, health, and well-being and decriminalizations of all transgender, gender nonconforming, lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and cisgender women so they can live their lives authentically without fear. She fights through relentless advocacy so these women can overcome all obstacles in their way. So thank you for joining us, Wendi. And
thank you.
And take it away.
Hey, everybody. So for me, when I speak, I like to, talk about my experience. And the reason why, because I think that it's important so people can have a full understanding about the discrimination that exists, right, in Louisiana when it comes down to LGBTQ individuals. So in 1999 and 2001, I was charged and convicted of 2 separate counts of crime against nature. And how I got that, I was on my way to go meet some friends at a bar room, and I was stopped by an officer. And during that time, I was not engaging in sex work, right? And so as the officer stopped me, we began to have a conversation. And from that conversation, I feel that I thought it appeared that he was attractive to me. And so 10 minutes into that conversation, the officer had arrested me and charged me with crime against nature. And so just to give some of you all a little bit of history about the crime against nature statute, it was a law that was enacted in 1805. This law was used to punish individuals for engaging in sexual activities that is not procreative. So in Louisiana, if you were to engage in sexual activities such as oral or anal sex, you can be charged with crime against nature. Up until 2012, individuals who was affected by the crime against nature statute was required to register as a sex offender. In 1982, Louisiana took it upon themselves to adopt this law, right? Representative John Dalian, I don't know, old white man, he felt like it was important to eliminate the existence of LGBTQ individuals by incarcerating them. And so they came up with this law. And a lot of times, when it was in the process, of discussing this law in legislation, they feel that, individuals who are in our community, need to be incarcerated for 5 years in prison, and also to require to register as a sex offender. And so for me, being labeled as that person, it was very, I feel like I was in a very dehumanizing situation, because as a sex offender, you was required to report your location to police officers and let them know like where you're living at, or if you're going to in some type of environment that is children friendly, you had to report these things, right? And so for me, and not just me, other individuals who was affected by this law, it was like a no hope situation, right? It was very hard. It was very hard for individuals to seek some type of employment because of the punitive damages that this law has caused towards individuals within our community itself. And so I feel that, as a woman of my experience and seeing my other siblings and sisters who was also affected by this law, whatever, it was some things that I needed to do to be able to help through this process so they're able to overcome these issues. And some of the things that I used to do in regards to trying to, help the individuals who were affected by this law, opening my home up to people so they're able to take baths, open up my home to people so they're able to eat, open up my home to people so they're able to, change clothing or to rest. And during that time, I'm dealing with the same issues that they're facing, having to register as a sex offender, and also to having to follow, having to follow the same requirements that they're able to do. And some of my siblings was unable to be acceptable, to these things that was really happening to them. And so for me, I had to find a way to be able to help the most marginalized, right? And so by doing it, I began to get active in the community. And like Cecilia was talking about earlier, that I was in a No Justice Project with Women with a Vision. And so basically this project was particularly focusing on the registration component, right? And so, when you are a sex offender, you are required to do certain things that you was unable to do. And there was a lot of things that you had to follow, right? And so I feel like for me and other individuals, walking around with this modern day Scarlet Letter, it was more of like, it was an injustice to it, right? Because we was labeled as something that we are not, right? And we are just human beings, right? And because of our existence and because of what we do, it just wasn't agreeable to society. And so because of this project, I was able to help get removed, over 800 people removed from the sex offender registry, right? And so, and because of that, right, they are unable to, they don't have to worry about walking around and presenting their identification card with the logo sex offender on there, right? And I still have my ID, because I want everybody to know this is what Louisiana is doing, and this is what they, this is what they trying to continue to do to eliminate, right, our community by dehumanizing us to the world. And so from there, from that victory, I feel that, for me, it wasn't a complete victory, right? Although, I helped so many people get removed from the sex offender registry, we still have to deal with the effects of the conviction, right? And the conviction is still there, right? And so, and because of the conviction, we still had to deal with hurdles, right? Up until that victory, leaders of Louisiana was very angry that the crime against nature statute was no longer registerable, right? And so what they did was they began to repeal laws in Louisiana, which is the incest laws and the aggravated incest laws. And what they did was they incorporated these laws into the crime against nature statute. So when agencies are doing background checks on individuals and they're seeing folks who are convicted of crime against nature, the first thing they're thinking is that, oh, these individuals was engaged in incest, or these individuals was having relations with their brother or their sister or their mother and their father and their cousin. That's just not the case. That's just how the world look at LGBTQ individuals, right? And so it was a victory, but I feel like it was something else that I needed to do, right? And so during the time when I was thinking of things, it took a couple of years to after that victory to realize that this is what I needed to do. And so in New Orleans, during that time, we didn't have a strong base LGBTQ community, and I'm saying that very respectfully. The reason why, because we were so conditioned, even myself, we were so conditioned in a way of that whatever is done to us, we had to accept it, right? And so we had to accept the things that was done to us, and because of that, that prohibited us to fight, right? And so one day I just happened to call so many individuals like Milan, Mariah, Cyria, Tia, Jasmine, Nia, so many people, and I began to express myself to them about, what I'm trying to do, but also too, they know that they know the issue, right, that I had to deal with in regards to this crime against nature statute, and not just me, others in the community, right? And so we put our heads together. I wanted to find a name for a campaign, right? And so Cyria said, well, let's do the Cans Can't Stand. And so I was like, I like that. And so, but we all agreed to, the Cans Can't Stand campaign. And so the Cans Can't Stand campaign is a continuation, right, of the No Justice Project, right? And so the No Justice Project, it was more of like getting the individuals removed from off the sex offender registry. But the Cans Can't Stand is about tackling the law itself, right? Getting the law removed and all these things, because Louisiana is this law that, it's a state that is very anti-LGBTQ, they are a firm believer of criminalizing, our community because of the non-agreements, but not looking at the fact that we are all human. And so, and by doing it, we had a symposium at Tulane University, just talking about the issues of the crime against nature statute to the students of that university. And it was broken down into a 2-part panel. And the first panel was basically, was folks who was on that portion of it was advocates of like not agreeing with the law, or advocates of like trying to fight to get this law removed. And then they was talking about the issues. I had a judge on the panel, and he was just being very honest, like he don't agree with the law. But because it's the law, right, you still can be charged with this charge and you get up to 5 years in prison. Because of an activity that we all enjoy doing, right? We all enjoy doing to our significant others. And so he was just being very realistic about the situation, and people was listening. These students was engaged, and these students was like, they couldn't believe this, and these students was like, it was just, crazy, right? And so the second part of the panel was more of people who was affected by the law, right? And these individuals was telling their stories. Trans folks, right, was telling their stories and telling us, like, telling people like how this law affected them so much. And then after that, the leaders of the city had to find other ways to be able to bring awareness to to this law, right? To this injustice. And so we had a march in the city of New Orleans, right? And so we walked the streets of New Orleans with pride flags and trans flags and signs and some members of our community was just dressed so unique because they wanted people to see that we are all visible and to see that we are all people. And so they began to educate the community. You had people from all over just coming over and just listening and saying that how awful this is that Louisiana will be able to do these to beautiful human beings, right? And so yeah, so I just feel like, you know, in Louisiana, we just have a lot of work to do. And also to like trying to bring that attention to other champions who are doing things in the community all across the United States to be able to get involved with this campaign to bring visibility to everyone so we're able to like remove this injustice, right? And the more the better, you know, so that's me.
Thank you, Wendi.
You're welcome.
And so now is really the Q&A session. So I have a question. So how do you think, you know, like in terms of beyond just the criminalization aspects, you know, like I know that in Louisiana, if somebody has been convicted, then they won't be able to change their name and gender marker. Is that still the situation, and what's being done, Wendi?
So for me, my situation is a little bit different in regards to that question, because at the time, I believe it was 2004, I got my name changed. I was still dealing with the effects of being a sex offender, you know, and having, you know, the crime against nature law on my record. And so when I went to the courthouse to get my name changed, the process for me wasn't difficult. And I believe that it wasn't difficult at the time because you know, you had certain individuals who was working within the criminal justice system just didn't agree with that law, right? And so if they was able to find ways to be able to help people get their name changed, and that's what they, you know, I got through the doors, right? And so now in New Orleans, they have and I'm bad with names, please forgive me, it's the name campaign. I'm so sorry, I'm bad with names. It's the name campaign, and basically like the name change campaign is basically like bringing awareness to like the fees, the high fees that are being paid, that you have to pay in order to get your name changed. And also too, it's the campaign is focused on please forgive me. It's focusing on like the high fees that in order for you to get your name changed, you have to pay like $500 and some just to get your name changed. And like that's just too high. That's just ridiculous. And I believe like the district attorney wants like the bulk of the money to come to them. And so, but you're not promised to get your name changed because of if you have a felony conviction on your record. And so what this campaign is doing is like they're trying to bring it to a legislation level so people will be able to get their name changed, you know, with convictions on their record. I'm making sense, y'all? Okay.
Yes. So in San Francisco, you know, like they have like service charges, you know, like very similar to Louisiana, but we have a waiver for people who, you know, who makes under a certain amount, you know, like a year, you know, all they have to do is to show a proof of income and file a waiver, and then they don't have to pay that. So yeah, so it sounds like, you know, like this is still a challenge in some cities, just like the whole bail bond situation. So I think that if any of the speakers can speak on that, you know, like there were some campaigns before, you know, like about ending bail bonds, and why is it important for the community? Anyone?
So in New Orleans, okay.
Well, go ahead, go first. Like maybe, yeah.
Oh no,
others-
I think it's important for well, in New Orleans, you have an organization called Operation Restoration, and so this is an organization that is ran by a cisgender woman who done 17 years in a federal correction facility. And so she, came home from prison and she began to advocate for women because she feel like women, all women, because we lack resources, right? When it comes down to like trying to navigate into the society. And so one of the programs that she has in the organization is the New Orleans Freedom Fund. And so this is a program that help individuals who are incarcerated, who are being brought into incarceration and they're unable to pay the bond, and this organization will pay the full portion of that bond, right? And so, and because if a person is incarcerated, just say for a piece of marijuana, right? And they're unable to get out of this facility, then they're unable to, they may lose their job, or they may not be able to pay their bills, or they can lose their home, or kids could be taken from them, right? Because it's something that is really so minor. And so for me, I think it's an importance too, but also too, when you think about these things, when you have other agencies that are paying the bonds for individuals to be released, now these days you have leaders of the state are trying to, if a person does get bond out, right, you have to find your own legal representation, right? So it's like, they're always trying to find ways to criminalize the individual so they're able to monopolize all our issues and our struggle.
And just to add to what Wendi said, and I really appreciate you raising the issue of people losing their jobs, people not being able to live their lives just because they missed 1 or 2 days of work because they got arrested for a joint. That's the reality of people's lives. I mean, the criminal legal system needs a lot of changes. But one in particular is we need to get rid of cash bond. Like, it's ridiculous, especially when we look at all over the country, there are different factors that judges consider for bond. And when I was at Sex Workers Project, one of the things I did was I started a program with another attorney, Chase, where we actually went down to court every time a trans woman was arrested for prostitution in Queens. Because what we saw there was a pipeline of people getting put in jail and then deported, or put in jail and left there, or people were forced to plead guilty quickly, which isn't good either. Once again, convictions on their record. And so one of the things that we had to do was actually educate the judge, educate the defense attorneys that bail and bond factors need to look differently depending on who you're representing. Because one of the factors often is family. Did family show up for you? And I worked with a lot of people who were undocumented. Now, do not get me wrong. I had lots of family members in the court for that person, but they weren't people who were related by blood. They were community who loved them, respected them, and would show up at midnight to ensure that they got released. And that was quite common. I mean, this was a program that we did with community. Anyway, but I just think it's so important that we can't just look at, like, obviously we need to get rid of cash bonds, but we also need to look at the factors that people are looking at. Just because someone might not have a quote unquote steady job that a judge thinks is a steady job, that's not okay. Factors look different for different people. And it was one of the things that I did a lot of work with, was educating judges and defense attorneys on bond factors for trans communities. And I just think that's so important for us to remember, because sometimes factors need to be looked at differently.
And oh my God, like, so I think that, there's enough, like, to write a book about, like how awful the system really is. I call that the cycle of poverty, because, like, it could start with just like one small violations. It could even be, like a speeding ticket that somebody cannot cannot pay, and it snowballed into a lifetime of incarceration. So it's, yeah, it's so hard to imagine unless, you know, like you are actually impacted by it. Janetta, what do you see as like one of the challenges, you know, that we're seeing in the whole criminal justice systems, the way that they treat trans people? You have to unmute, Janetta.
Working directly with trans people coming directly out of prison, I just see that all the trauma that they experience while being on the inside, being in relationships and that are not healthy and not safe, and people being forced into, I mean, it's not so much as like some people are being physically forced into being in different relationship situations. I can remember when I was in the shoe, and I was in the shoe for my protection. And I was trying to navigate and negotiate my way out of the shoe because there was a program that I was eligible for that would have let me out in May of 2012. If I wouldn't have gotten involved in that program, I wouldn't have got out until April of 2014. But I was in the shoe trying to negotiate my way out, and they were like, basically, they told me, whenever you get out of here, go find a boyfriend or go get into a gang. And I'm like, what the hell is y'all trying to do? I'm like, I was just devastated. Like, I was completely lost and devastated that, like, a captain in a correction facility would say that that's an option for me, is to, you know, and also being in the shoe and them placing people in the cell with me and saying, you don't get special privileges because you're trans. And I'm like, I'm not asking for special privileges. I'm just asking to be safe, you know, and them not really understanding that a trans person people need to be protected in systems like that. And it's just the challenges that we even face with people coming out is having a good access to mental health care, because if you don't have culturally competent mental health care, or if you don't have a place to stay after, I know for me, there's been many times that I've met with a therapist, a coach, a mental health professional, and I thank God that I had a place to stay because of all the trauma that I've experienced, is that I've had to come home and I've just had to cry and scream and sometimes just sit with the terror and the trauma that I've experienced. And a lot of times, if you've experienced those things, there's like these pop-ups that just pop up, and I'm like, and it's complete terror. So it's just a lot of work that you have to undo, that the prison industrial complex has perpetuated on us as trans people, even to the extent of leaving you standing there completely naked when a shift change, so everybody gets to see your naked body. You know, it's just those things, and those are the things. I mean, they used to come up more regular, but it seems like once a year that always hit me at the most inconvenient time, where I have to be alone and I have to make sure that my doors are locked and my windows are locked, because I just need to feel safe. And a lot of that stems from being in the criminal justice system, and the way that correctional officers and warden perpetuates violence towards us, because they support and encourage these things to happen to trans people. So it's just like dealing with the trauma. I can remember getting out of prison, and I'm like, and being in the halfway house, and I'm like, no, I need to be in therapy on Monday and I need to be in therapy on Friday. And because coming out of prison and being in this dangerous setting, and then coming to the halfway house and seeing people that remind me, and even the way the correctional people treat you inside those systems, it's just like you're still in prison. So you still have the same, like always having to watch for your safety and your survival and wondering if people are going to perpetuate things on you. And it might be simple things where correctional officers put you in different situations where you have to like navigate yourself out. But I had to see a mental health professional every Monday and every Friday because that's what I needed. And I did that for about 18 months. And it was just all about like trying to get all that stuff off of me from incarceration and just develop a new life. And everybody doesn't make it because sometimes, you know, we self-medicate. And then it's like, you know, trans people experience those things and yeah.
So I want to follow up with that, Janetta, is like, just for full disclosure, Janetta and I have worked on, you know, like trying to transform the housing systems in San Francisco jail and in the California correction system, to the point that I got so impatient, I just walked up and left. And I told Janetta to, here, you go, you take over. And can you share a little bit about these progress that had happened, you know, in the last 10 years?
Me?
Yes.
Well,
What progress?
I don't know.
in
It just
quotations?
seems like you go forward and then you fall double step backwards. I can't really. I don't feel like I could really comment on it because I don't really. I mean, you like. I don't have a reason to celebrate right now. I feel like I don't have a reason to celebrate. And sometimes I get with my community and I celebrate, but it's just because I don't know. It's just, I can't really talk about that because it's just really hard because the minute you have hope, you lose all that hope. You know what I mean? So, and the state that I'm in currently right now, the sadness that I'm experiencing right now is Black trans people that are currently unhoused, constantly being judged and left out. Yeah, out of housing, specifically as we talk about people that are coming directly out of prison right now. We've been fortunate enough that for the most part, we've been able to take in the trans people that came out specifically during COVID. And I mean, that was a whole sad thing too. People waiting to get out of prison, wait and wait and wait. And then they get out to this shithole COVID. It's like, I don't know. It's just, yeah. So I can't really speak on that. And I know there's some small victories, but I think that I'm 56, 57, somewhere along those lines, and I haven't seen enough. It's still, you know, some of us are surviving and able to create sustainability, but a lot of our community members haven't reached there. And I believe it's because of the carceral damage that we've experienced, you know, throughout the oppressive systems that continue to rear its ugly head, like the situation that's going on with Florida. I mean, that feels very demeaning. So I'm kind of down a little bit about that.
But that's so real, Janetta, and also, you know, like it's kind of tongue in cheek when I ask about progress, is because, you know, the best progress is, you know, like not having such a punishing system, you know, like for anyone, especially, you know, for trans women of color. You know, like the violence, you know, like both, you know, like systemic, institutional, and personal, interpersonal violence are things that most transgender women of color have to face on a daily basis. So, and not to mention, you know, like when people are incarcerated, it's less likely that they're gonna get good healthcare.
Yeah.
And I think that is especially true also for Louisiana, you know, like the kind of providers that they use for that.
And I'm very happy with all the organizations that are providing correspondence, legal support, and visits to our folks on the inside until we get there. And when I say until we get there, until we get to a place of abolition, because I'm an abolitionist, TGIJP is an abolitionist organization. Miss Major, Black trans elder that raised me, and so until we get there, I'm glad people are providing the services that people are providing, and the love and the attention and the attentiveness. I'm glad that we're in positions, and I hope more and more that we're doing our best that we can to support trans people that are inside. And just glad that we are showing up in some ways for our folks. And it's sad that we can't catch them all, but I know that a lot of us are catching as many people as we can, just to know that when they get out, they have a home to come to, because TGIJP considers ourselves a surrogate family. So when people come home to us. We're gonna do the best that we can. Now, we ain't gonna be the perfect family now, but we damn gonna try to be that excellent family. And I always tell people, if you don't have a family, just pick one. You got uncles and aunts and cousins, brothers and sisters. You know, we have to get our needs met, no matter how we get our needs met. I can remember saying to myself one time, I'm like, saying to God, I don't remember what it felt like to lay my head on my mama's breast and just cry and cry and cry. Well, I came to San Francisco not knowing anybody, and there Miss Major goes with those big old titties. So I was able to, I spent years just crying out to her and telling her all the trauma and the pain and everything that happened. So I just hope that until abolitionists come, that we continue to support our folks on the inside and really be intentional. And that could mean several ways, like volunteering at a place where they do mail night and correspondence, find a pen pal, donate a few dollars, send a book of stamps. You know, any little thing that we can do as community members to commit to supporting our folks that are on the inside until they get out. Those are the things that make me happy. Like those, and these organizations that are listed that are doing this work, these are the things that make me happy. The work that y'all are doing over at TLC, those are the things that are making me happy. And the girls in various states that are building tiny houses, like those are the things make me happy. So that as Michelle Alexander, the new Jim Crow, says that we talk a lot about abolition, but we also need to be making sure that we have the resources so when people come home, they don't have to return.
Thank you. I think that that's such an important point. And I think that we are over time a little, but I've got words that we can actually stay on longer if there are questions coming in. So I just want to say that, like one of the things that I'm really heartened to see is that in the last 20 years, we see a lot of leaders emerging from the communities who have been survivors of the systems, who are, like taking charge and helping the communities. Like you said, there are like small houses being built now, like in New Orleans, in Memphis, and in Alabama and in Atlanta. So I think that it's really important, like for folks, like our allies and partners, to really see, like the work that we do and try to support it. So maybe this is a way to really wrap it up, is if you all can go around, and say, what are you currently doing and how people can support you. We'll start from whoever. Janetta.
Can you repeat the question?
What are you currently doing and how can people support you?
Well, Because of the pandemic, we slowed our mail down, even though we've always responded to legal mail during the pandemic, but we're starting our mail night, which is our correspondence program where we support our community members on the inside and they are a family. So this next week, we will be officially, and we're only opening it up to a core group right now. And those are people that we have put through ambassador training and retreat, which is 10 weeks. That's community members that are currently just been housed as a result of the pandemic. But we're gonna be opening up our correspondence program. So we will eventually have community members coming in and supporting our community members in the inside. Like I said, TGIGP acts as a surrogate family for trans people that are in Florida prison, but really focusing on trans people coming directly out of prison. So it's going to be exciting because our legal department has strengthened so much, and we get to just focus on giving love to our folks on the inside.
So is there a way for people who are like not in San Francisco or the Bay Area, like help out in TGIJP's work?
Sure. If people have certain graphic skills, communication skills, any type of trainings that they feel like TGIJP should be doing to support the community and becoming politicized. Because we have a group that meets every Thursday, and we've been holding that slot for a long time, and we just started with that slot open to provide political education to the community members and the constituents, because a lot of people, because of their daily survival and existing and have to do different things in order to sustain themselves, they don't have the time. They don't even know about exactly what does it mean to be politicized and have political education and be empowered and understanding oppressive systems and understanding things just as simple as why you don't want to take a picture with Ronald Reagan when you see Ronald Reagan in the capital of Sacramento, and just saying like, boo, you can take a picture with this person. I know it's a president. And remember you told me in the 60s and the 70s, all your family ended up in prison and all of them went to jail, and all of them, that's because the war on drugs, that's because Ronald and Nancy Reagan. So you can decide if you still want to take because a lot of people have a lot of childhood trauma that were raised by parents during the war on drugs, and they're like they don't have that information to understand, to even find the forgiveness, to understand that it was all a setup, and I understand grandma had 15 children and they all ended up in jail and prison, but that's what you call systemic oppression. That's what you call government. That's what you call, oppression, and being able to empower people that way to get on the other side of all the mess that we've experienced in our life.
Wendi, do you have any work that you're working on that people can support you on?
Yeah, so currently I am building my own organization, which y'all see, Transcendent Women. And so this is an organization that supports and empower all women to become agent of change in their communities. And the reason why I chose to deal with women as a whole is because I feel like we could put so much, bring so much education and awareness into what's going on, today. And also too, when I think about our movement, for me, our movement is like, separating us, right? And putting us in this box, and so the organization itself is like trying to break away from that, right? And it's bring communities together as a whole. And so I'm building an organization, but in the process too, like, you know, I do have like, you know, funding that's coming into the organization, but the funding that comes into the organization is for community. And as of now, you know, I am not getting a salary for the work that I'm doing for the people. And so basically I'm trying to work on trying to be able to sustain the salary, so I'm able to, you know, help my community, like my children that I'm raising, that I've been having since birth, and my sister who is currently disabled, you know, but I'm unable to do these things because I don't have the funds that I need to be able to help myself. But as of now, I'm okay because I'm so busy focusing on community. And so basically just trying to find, if y'all know any funders that want to talk to me and want to be able to support my work, to support me, you know, it would be greatly appreciated. So yeah.
Well,
That's me.
hopefully there are some representatives from different funders attending this plenary, you know, like
Yes.
you never know, but like this, we can also talk offline as well. And, you know, like I am more than happy to support your leadership as well as Janetta, of course, you know, like, and Lynly, can you share a little bit of whatever you can share publicly about what we're doing?
Sure. So really quick, a couple of years ago, our litigation department did a shift in our litigation focus. Historically, we really focused a lot of our impact litigation on identity documents, on employment, access to restrooms. We did a shift 3 years ago or so to focus almost entirely our impact litigation on criminalization. And that's really attacking the laws that criminalize trans people, the conditions inside prisons and jails that impact trans people, and last is the collateral consequences of convictions, like sex offender registries, like inability to get employment. So that's where our all of our litigation focus is at right now. And I'm actually going to plug something else if people want to get involved. A project that is not well known that TLC is involved in is our Border Butterflies project. And it's a project that we have in collaboration with the Black LGBT Migrants Project, as well as Familia. And it supports LGBT migrants who are in Mexico who want to come into the United States and want to seek asylum. So my plug is, if anyone is interested in sponsoring someone who comes into the United States, we are really always looking for sponsors. And there's so many people on this call. I just had to throw that out there. We are actually seeing people able to get into the United States right now, but we still have about 50 or 60 people in Tijuana. So if people do have interest or have more questions, please let me know. It's a very exciting project, huge, great collaboration with amazing organizations. We have an attorney in Mexico. We have anyway, I'm not going to keep going about it, but it's a great collaboration if anyone has any interest in sponsorships. And the last thing is, we do have a prison mail program. And if people want to get involved and help respond to letters, please reach out to me, or you could go on to our website and there's information there as well.
Okay,
and
so
I realize I spoke very quickly. I am sorry for the interpreters that I spoke so quick.
And I apologize for going over time, you know, because I asked for 1 hour of your time and now it's like 20 minutes over, and Janetta is going to strangle me if I continue. So thanks again for joining us today, and I hope audience get something out of this plenary, and I'm sure that we will continue this conversations again, you know, like at another time. Thank you so much.
Yes, and I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Cecilia, Wendi, Lynly, and Janetta for sharing your time, your expertise, your stories. What a great way to start off day 2 of HINAC. Thank you all so much, and I hope that you've already looked through the agenda and have picked out your sessions for this afternoon. Have a great day, and we will all be together tomorrow morning, or tomorrow afternoon, sorry, for the next plenary. But thank you, I applaud you all. Wonderful job, and thank you so much.